History tells that, in 1623, the Council of Castile issued an extraordinary decree. Every woman who confessed to love spell sorcery was to be put under strict guard to avoid the contagion of souls. In those days, young ladies feared the damning label spinster more than the inquisitorial pyre, for the first condemned them to lifelong shame, whereas the second at least offered the balm of death. In a world ruled by entailed estates, papal bulls, and lineage, a woman's horizon ended with wife and mother. That mandate, hammered for centuries into female flesh and subconscious alike, fermented into a delirious yearning, defined a husband who would grant her name and roof. Some, hounded by the echo of their ticking wombs and the sting of neighbors' stares, were ready to pay the unthinkable. Thus blossomed the devout promise, a clandestine rite ascribed to the grimoire Clavis Abyssi, a supposed compendium of forbidden alchemies that circulated in loose sheets across the peninsula. The formula read, "Surrender your last breath to the shadow, and the shadow will gift you too, your own, and that of the one you wish to bind." So was born the curse of the eternal embrace. In May of 2005, Beatriz Lara and Esteban de Burgos had just moved out to Anievas, or rather, they had returned. Bea, as everyone called her, had been Esteban's love since secondary school. They had been together for 14 years, marriage accepted, no children yet. For her, her parents' union stood as ample proof that a ring was less an alliance than a shackle. In her creed, love need not be proclaimed, it need only be felt. Esteban, idealist, writer, was far less pragmatic. On paper, he believed, the best stories come alive, and only ink makes them endure. For him, love is ratified by mutual vows, before God, or at least before man. They were unalike in every way: philosophy, faith, politics, even about the lemon in the soup. Yet something inexplicable bound their souls tight. Money problems, the reason for their return to their birthplace, did nothing to loosen that knot. Awaiting them stood the novelist's ancestral house, vast as the lineage it represented. The Leblancs. The name is etched forever in stone above the door. The grey stone colossus faced the Romanesque church of St. Andrew. La Casona, the villagers called it, had stood empty since the deaths of Esteban's parents, Guillermo de Burgos and Fatima. The prodigal son had skipped their funeral and never spoke of the accident. Family businesses were parceled out among bloodkin, and Esteban's literary vocation, his sole ambition, yielded no harvest. Nor did Bea find a job after quitting academia, weary of begging for grants. After so many years, the novelist returned, hoping the familiar horizon would rekindle his vein. The mansion, its Cantabrian branch tracing to the 17th century, hides more than one secret. A wing bricked up after a 1956 fire, a family archive of fading rolls, and an ancient clump of white lilies that refused to bloom. Bea set about restoring her father-in-law's erstwhile distillery. Esteban reopened the library and intended to work on a historical novel set in the region. One drab May afternoon, cataloguing shelves, he found a small white carved chest bound in silver trim. Inside lay a gold crucifix and a parchment notebook signed by F.D. Aguirre, notary and witness to the burning of a supposed woman of the devil named Isabel. A footnote declared that the devout promise should accompany the testimony, but the proof was missing. Disturbed and curious, Esteban vowed to scour the house for more. He searched everywhere, rooms, attic, all but the fire-gutted wing. But something lured him there. Breaking through the sealed doorway, he discovered, half buried in debris, the very vow of the devout promise. Inked by quill, spattered with wax, the parchment bore no scorch marks, though it was centuries older than the fire. A marginal warning read, "Whoever opens this leaf accepts the grave consequence of being heard by she who does not breathe." Esteban ignored it and read on, struggling through archaic Castilian salted with Latin. When at last he looked up, he noticed a vase of the same type of plant, of barren lilies, at the charred frame of a painting. A breeze tickled his nape, faint, cold, and a whisper rose with the scent of lilies. He thought he had heard some footsteps in the void, but there was nothing there.
Who is there?
Suddenly, dizziness swept him. Darkness claimed him. Bea found him 3 hours later, sprawled on the sooty floor, black handprints on his chest.
Are you okay?
From that night on, at every stroke of midnight, a perfume of withered lilies seeped through the house. Old beams exhaled bonfire smoke, and St. Andrew's bell tolled through the air lay still. The days that followed, especially the nights, turned ghastly. Esteban laughed and talked in his sleep, plagued by a new, unsettling somnambulism. More than once, Bea woke to an empty bed and found him standing before the unsealed wing, muttering to unseen company. By morning, Esteban never remembered what happened, and only believed Bea's testimony after seeing her dirty feet in stained sheets. Jealous fury fled.
Who's Isabel? What's wrong with Esteban? Had he lost his mind?
At night, they were always intoxicated by the same smell of smoke and flowers. Not so far away, they could hear the chimes. It made her shudder. She also felt that Esteban was no longer the same. She had the feeling that he was slowly drifting away from her. He was irascible. They argued all the time over things that were usually of no relevance. Even though they were together, for the first time, Bea felt very lonely. She decided it was time to get out of that house, which was so far away from civilization, even if she had to drag Esteban with her. She thought it would be good for both of them, and also for her refrigerator, which was begging for groceries because the reserves they had brought or bought on the way were starting to run low. They left for their afternoon excursion to the center of the village. Once Esteban awoke from his long sleep, he slept and woke up later than usual. She would leave him rest. They went to buy vegetables and explore the area once again. Bea had the feeling that almost every villager they came across looked at them strangely, although it could just be her impression, given the exhaustion that the last few days had produced in her, between repairs and the strange events that were happening in her new home. They felt they were being watched like two strangers. It was the first time they had been seen in years, and now they were the new hosts of the large house in front of St. Andrew's Church, that house where they had seen lights come on at impossible hours and smelled mixtures of fetid and floral odors wafting from the galleries. But while they were picking the fruits of the season, a gray-haired gentleman crept up behind them and exclaimed in his gnawing voice,
"Young master."
It was the old Roman, the former housekeeper who had worked all his life at the Leblanc mansion, where Esteban had grown up, until the very boy he had held in such esteem decided to leave, leaving old Roman half-hearted at first, but relieved that the young master would be safe.
Safe from what? From whom?
I thought you wouldn't come back, and I prayed that you wouldn't.
They chatted for a while, catching up and explaining the reason for their return. Eventually, they both began to toss out questions, bent on understanding what was going on. Among them resounded the question of whether he or anyone else in Anievas knew anything about F. de Aguirre and Isabel. The old man began to stutter. He trembled as he took the fruits in his hands in a vague attempt to pick them out and evade the interrogation. But finally, with a stealthy gesture, Roman led them to an alley behind the parish and revealed snippets of a cursed legacy.
If you don't know your family history, then I will let you know.
For the last 4 centuries, approximately every 50 years, a Leblanc male or a blood heir vanishes or turns up dead, lips blackened and burnt lilies. Maximiliano I, 1844, Eloy, 1853, Eduardo, 1905, Maximiliano II, 1956. That was Esteban's grandfather. Other names he repeats. During all that time, they have pretended to ignore the cause of such a tragedy. Then, Roman told the legend. Isabel de Anievas, her true bloodline long forgotten, sealed the devout promise right here in this same Cantabrian village. She bartered her soul and her surname in exchange for eternal life and a prosperous love that would not let her wither away. Eternity, however, demands death as key. Therefore, when the spell completes, the witch no longer walks. Her intended does, in dream or waking, toward the brink of his own life. Since then, the Breathless Lady roams ruins and cornices, soot prints on the skin where she burned, white hair trailing the ground like the bridal veil she never wore. She waits for the chosen one, ready to embrace him once and forever. The bond woven in shadow never breaks. The kiss that seals it lasts as long as the night that will not end. If you smell withered lilies and hear your name whispered with ancient tenderness, do not answer. You may be a heartbeat from the infinite kiss, the eternal embrace. White lilies bloom only on the eve of each disappearance. At dawn, the flowers lie burnt. It was old Maximiliano II who tried to break the vase into pieces and throw away the flowerless bunch, but it always reappeared in the same place, beneath Guillaume Leblanc's painting. An attempt was made to set fire to the cursed folio that Esteban had found. With those relics burned his unhinged paternal ascendancy, and with him burned that room. Firefighters arrived just in time, before the fire spread and devoured the rest of the house, and the rest of the Leblancs. The next morning of that nefarious dawn, that piece of satanic parchment was intact, as if the fire refused it. It was Roman himself, then just a boy, who buried the charred remains of the master in the family cemetery and bricked the cursed wing. For decades, he lived as a sentinel of the abandonment, swearing that something behind the walls breathed differently. He helped raise his father, Maximilian III, and tried not to let that traumatic experience mark him or Esteban. The last time he saw the boy, now a man, he was leaving for Madrid. Now, in his 80s, Roman holds the ash cane as if it was still guarding the front door. The old man also confessed that before closing the wing, he tried to reduce the devout promise to ashes again in the courtyard. He made the same attempt with Aguirre's manuscript in 1958. He saw it burn, but the next morning the trunk was still intact, as if the fire refused it. It was all in vain.
The house keeps no relics, young master. The house keeps callings. Whoever hears them walks to her.
But who was she, Isabel, that witch who has crossed centuries seeking company? Who was F.D. Aguirre? Why did all this keep happening? Why his family? Why him? Esteban wondered, deeply dismayed at the sudden revelation.
You don't seem to have understood anything. Her, Isabel, the Breathless Lady. The mansion stands upon her ruins, and the prestige of your name goes back to Guillaume Leblanc.
He was a Gascon merchant who opened a cloth route between Laredo and Bordeaux. When Isabel was burned for her infamous obeisance to the Lord of Darkness, Guillaume inherited the land and the right to build a mansion on the embers and later a workshop on the land. But the witch, whose dying soul, bound forever to this dimension, once uttered the devout promise, vowed to embrace him and a firstborn male of his blood, at least one every half-century. Thus, she would repay them with the last kiss, with the eternal embrace, and therefore her passage on this earth would endure. Isabel, the eternal wife of the Leblancs. In passing, she would spend 4 centuries collecting interest from Guillaume. Fray Francisco de Aguirre, apostolic notary, presided over the inquisitorial cause. He documented the entire trial and secretly sealed the original promise, convinced that the sentence of Isabel's guilt before God would prevail as an example. There would be no redemption for the soul of that possessed wretch. He later took it to the newly built Leblanc mansion, gifting it to the great lord and master as a trophy. Esteban is, in the end, merely another debt. The lilies will bloom and will burn once more. Then, Isabel will continue to be free to roam. Though Esteban has no heirs, it will not end with him, for others of his line will come. These others will come to her call, bearing at least a drop of Leblanc blood, firstborns of siblings, cousins, who ignore the curse that rests on the manor house. Thus, the witch will continue to collect. She will do so by driving her boyfriends to madness at times, and will consummate love in an infinite kiss.
Nonsense! He wants to scare us!
Gael replied, first denying everything she had heard.
No, miss, I would never play with your sanity, nor with your life. I'm sorry to tell you that it's too late. You should never have come. You recognize deep down the veracity of what I am revealing to you, for what you have seen, for what has shaken you inside that house. It is doomed, and it tortures me that I can do nothing to prevent it.
No, I won't allow it. I'll take him far away from here, far away from that damned house, far away from this damned town.
It's impossible, miss. I'm very sorry. None of the chosen ones have managed to evade the unleashed darkness.
Esteban, his eyes flooded with terror, was speechless, not knowing what to do or what to say.
No! At this very moment, we are leaving!
Bea dragged a paralyzed Esteban, shocked by fear, to their car. She started the engine and sped, looking for the exit of that village to which she would never want to return. They would leave everything behind and try to start all over again, yet every road twisted back to town. She drove in circles for half an hour, while Esteban fell into another trance, skin blanching. She had him in the passenger seat. He was convulsing. Bea panicked and did not know how to react. All of a sudden, a stench of dead lilies and burnt flesh flooded the car. Then, something that was not snow, but ashes, began to fall on the windshield. Her eyesight became difficult to see. She glanced for a moment in the rearview mirror, and there it was. A terrified scream escaped her when she saw the silver-haired shadow, that somber, macabre spirit oozing hate. Bea lost control and crashed into a saber tree in the forest that they had entered by deviating from the road to nowhere where she was driving. She struck her head and blacked out for hours. Night had fallen when she awoke, bleeding and alone. The pain in her head was indescribable. She took a handkerchief she found in the drawer of the other seat and tried to use it as a tourniquet to stop the bleeding. She was weak, apparently after losing a lot of blood. She decided to go deeper into the forest, hoping to find his beloved. She took a flashlight she had also kept and set out on her way for another half hour. She kept falling to the ground, was disoriented, and thought that this would be the end of her, that she would not make it, and that she would never see Esteban again. Then the dense forest reached its end, and there stood St. Andrew's Church. Just in front, that spurious mansion, its door gaped open. Esteban had arrived, been guided. Before, the barren clump of the garden burst into 7 snowy blossoms, glowing like tapers. The clock in the bell tower struck 5 minutes to midnight.
At that instant, the flashlight suddenly stopped working.
Bea attempted to turn on the lights, but everything would remain dark. Then she searched the kitchen for a candle and matches. In that faint light, she found Esteban, the man she loved so much, and regretted never having accepted his hand. She thought for a moment of everything they had lived together. She thought of her happiest moments, which were always by his side. Esteban walked again with his eyes closed, sleepwalking, this time making his way through the rubble and the icy emptiness of the burned wing. She ran towards him and assured him,
Love, I'm here.
He turned, no longer himself. She clasped his hand. It burned her, smearing soot on her palm. Behind him, the lilies overflowed the vase. A glacial gust snuffed the candle. An unseen force yanked her backward, lifted her into the air, and hurled her against the floor. The blow fractured her skull. Bea died instantly. For Esteban, it was already late too. He advanced to the flowered vase beneath the scorched portrait leaning against the bare wall, while humming the name of Isabel, his beloved of centuries. The bell of St. Andrew's tolled 7 times. Isabel emerged fleshless, modelled in smoke in front of him. The veil of white hair swirled like thick water. Esteban took a step. The parchment was lifted and sewn to his chest.
Your last breath is mine, Leblanc, and hers is the price of your sleeplessness.
The Breathless Lady took the bouquet of white lilies as if it were on an altar. She kissed him, his lips blackened like ebony. In that eternal embrace, she claimed his soul. Isabel dissolved into eddies the wind devoured. Esteban fell to his knees, dead. Outside, the lilies of the flower bed were now dry stalks. When touched, they pulverized, releasing a smell of old paper. So he saw old Roman when he knew that the inevitable had already happened. The eternal embrace ends until someone again speaks the name of she who does not breathe.